Brothers and sisters, there is a profound peace that comes when we learn to place everything in the hands of God. This is not a fleeting sentiment or a hollow phrase, but a call to trust the Creator of the heavens and the earth with every fiber of our being. The sovereignty of God is a cornerstone of our faith, a truth so profound that it transforms the way we view every aspect of our lives. To say that God is sovereign is to declare that He reigns over all things, that His authority extends from the vastness of the cosmos to the smallest detail of our daily lives. It is to affirm that nothing escapes His notice, nothing occurs outside His will, and nothing unfolds without His divine permission or purpose. This truth is both awe-inspiring and deeply comforting, for it reminds us that our lives are not subject to whims of chance or the chaos of a random universe, but are held firmly in the hands of a loving Creator. When we reflect on God's sovereignty, we must begin by recognizing His power. The same God who spoke the world into existence, who commands the wind and the waves, and who sustains all life with a word, is the one who governs our days. His power is unmatched. His wisdom is unsearchable, and His plans are perfect. This understanding humbles us, for we are reminded of our own limitations. We see how small we are in comparison to the grandeur of His creation, yet we also see how precious we are to Him, for He has made us in His image and calls us His children. This sovereignty also speaks to God's providence, His active care for His creation. It is not enough to believe that God is powerful, we must also believe that He is good. His rule is not tyrannical or arbitrary, but is marked by love, justice, and mercy. Every event in our lives, no matter how insignificant it may seem, is woven into the fabric of His eternal plan. What appears to us as a detour or a setback is, in His hands, part of a greater story, a story in which every thread contributes to the beauty of the whole. Yet, this is where the challenge of faith arises. When life brings trials, when the storms rage and the darkness seems impenetrable, it can be difficult to trust in God's sovereignty. We are tempted to question His plan, to wonder why He allows suffering or why He does not intervene as we expect. But here is the mystery of His rule. His purposes often transcend our understanding. As the prophet Isaiah wrote, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." To trust in God's sovereignty, then, requires surrender. It means releasing our need for control and acknowledging that He alone is God. This is not a passive resignation, but an active choice to rest in His promises. It is to say, "Lord, I may not understand, but I trust You. I trust that You are working all things together for good, even when I cannot see the outcome." This surrender is an act of worship, a declaration of faith that honors His rightful place as Lord over all. The sovereignty of God also brings profound peace. When we place our lives in His hands, we are freed from the burden of trying to control what is beyond our power. We can let go of fear, knowing that He is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. We can face uncertainty with confidence, for He has promised never to leave us nor forsake us. And we can embrace hope, for we know that He is guiding us toward a future filled with His glory and our ultimate good. To live in light of God's sovereignty is to walk in trust and humility. It is to recognize that our plans, as well-intentioned as they may be, are subject to His greater wisdom. It is to bow before Him, not in despair, but in joyful acknowledgement of His majesty. And it is to find in Him the anchor for our souls, steadfast and sure, no matter what storms may come. For when all is said and done, the hands that hold the universe are the same hands that hold us, with a love that will never let us go. True faith is not a passive or abstract concept. It is a living, active trust in God that demands the surrender of our whole being to His will. It is more than intellectual assent or mere belief in His existence. It is a deep and abiding confidence in His character, promises, and purposes, even when we cannot see how they will unfold. Faith calls us to place every aspect of our lives, our hopes, fears, joys, and burdens, in the hands of a God who is infinitely wise and unchangingly good. This kind of faith is not easy, but it is essential, for it is through faith that we truly encounter the fullness of His grace and power. At its heart, true faith is relational. It grows out of a personal and intimate knowledge of God cultivated through prayer, the study of His Word, and communion with Him in every season of life. Faith is not blind, it is rooted in the evidence of God's faithfulness throughout history and in our own lives. When we remember how He has provided, protected, and guided us, our trust in Him deepens. The more we know Him, the more we understand that His plans are higher than our plans, His wisdom greater than our own, and His love beyond measure. Yet true faith often requires us to step into the unknown. It demands that we release our grip on the things we cannot control and trust God to lead us where we cannot see. This is not a comfortable or natural inclination for most of us. We prefer certainty and clarity, desiring to know the path ahead before we take a single step. But faith is not about walking by sight. It is about walking by trust. It is about believing that God is already present in our tomorrows, preparing the way for us and providing for our every need. Faith is also a surrendering of our will to God's will. It is a recognition that He knows what is best for us, even when His ways seem mysterious or challenging. To have faith is to say, Lord, I trust You even though I don't understand. I trust Your timing, Your methods, and Your heart. This surrender is not a sign of weakness, but of strength, for it reflects a profound dependence on the One who holds all things in His hands. It is an act of humility, acknowledging that our limited perspective cannot compare to His infinite wisdom. True faith transforms us. It shapes the way we respond to life's trials, giving us the courage to persevere and the hope to endure. It teaches us to lean not on our own strength, but on the sufficiency of God's grace. Faith enables us to move forward, even when the way seems unclear, trusting that He will provide the light we need for each step. It fills our hearts with peace, knowing that we are not alone, and with joy, knowing that His plans for us are good. Living in faith is not a one-time decision, but a daily choice to trust God in every area of our lives. It is a journey of learning to let go of our fears and control and to place our confidence in His unchanging character. True faith invites us into a deeper relationship with God, one that transforms our perspective, strengthens our resolve, and fills our lives with the assurance that He is faithful and trustworthy in all things. It is in this faith that we find our rest, our hope, and our ultimate fulfillment in Him. The power of surrender lies at the heart of a life truly lived in relationship with God. It is a profound and transformative act, one that requires us to lay down our desires, our fears, and our sense of control, and entrust them entirely to Him. Far from being an act of weakness, surrender is the ultimate expression of trust in God's sovereignty and love. It is a recognition that His plans for us are far greater than anything we could design for ourselves, and that His wisdom infinitely surpasses our own. To surrender to God is not to give up, but to give over. It is to acknowledge that we cannot carry the weight of the world on our own shoulders, and that we were never meant to. Our human inclination is to strive, to plan, and to hold tightly to the things we cherish or fear losing. But this constant grasping leads only to weariness and anxiety. True surrender, however, brings peace, a peace that flows from the assurance that God is in control, and that He works all things for the good of those who love Him. Surrendering to God does not mean abandoning responsibility or living passively. Rather, it is a conscious decision to align our will with His and to trust Him to guide our steps. It means releasing the outcomes of our efforts into His hands and trusting that He will bring about what is right and good in His perfect timing. This act of yielding is both humbling and liberating. It frees us from the burden of trying to orchestrate every detail of our lives and allows us to rest in the knowledge that God is at work, even in ways we cannot see. One of the greatest challenges of surrender is the letting go of fear. Fear often drives us to cling to control, believing that if we can manage every detail, we can protect ourselves from harm or disappointment. But fear is a heavy burden, and it blinds us to the truth of God's love and provision. Surrendering to God means releasing our fears to Him and trusting that He is our refuge and strength. It is to believe that His plans for us are good, even when the path ahead seems uncertain or difficult. The power of surrender is perhaps most beautifully seen in the life of Jesus Christ, who, in the Garden of Gethsemane, prayed, "Not my will, but yours be done." In that moment, He surrendered Himself completely to the Father's plan, even though it would lead to suffering and death. His surrender brought about the greatest victory, the redemption of humanity and the triumph of life over death. In following his example, we too can experience the power of surrender in our own lives. When we place our lives in God's hands, surrendering our plans, fears, and desires to him, we make room for his power to work in us and through us. We discover that surrender is not the end, but the beginning of a life filled with peace, purpose, and the joy of knowing that we are held by the one who loves us beyond measure. It is in surrender that we find the freedom to live fully and abundantly, not in our strength, but in his. The reward of trust in God is a treasure beyond compare, one that transforms our lives in ways we often cannot anticipate. To trust in God is to anchor ourselves in his promises and character, knowing that he is faithful to accomplish all that he has set out to do. While trust requires an initial act of faith, the rewards it brings unfold throughout our journey with him, revealing a depth of peace, joy, and purpose that nothing else can offer. When we entrust our lives to God, we begin to experience the fullness of his care, even in ways we do not immediately recognize. One of the most profound rewards of trusting God is the peace that it brings. This is not a fleeting or superficial peace that depends on favorable circumstances, but a deep and abiding tranquility that remains steadfast even in the face of uncertainty or hardship. This peace is rooted in the assurance that God is in control and that his purposes will prevail. When we trust in him, we no longer need to carry the burden of anxiety or fear, for we know that our lives are held securely in his hands. As the psalmist declares, "You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you." Trusting God also fills us with hope, a hope that is unshakable because it is grounded in his unchanging nature. While the world often offers fragile and temporary sources of hope, God's promises endure forever. When we trust him, we are able to face even the darkest moments with the confidence that he is working all things together for good. This hope does not ignore the reality of suffering, but places it within the context of God's greater plan, reminding us that he can redeem even the most difficult circumstances for his glory and our ultimate benefit. Another reward of trust is the clarity and direction it brings to our lives. When we place our trust in God, we open ourselves to his guidance and wisdom, allowing him to lead us along the paths he has prepared for us. Often, we struggle with indecision or confusion because we rely on our limited understanding. But when we trust God, we acknowledge that he sees the end from the beginning and that his ways are higher than ours. Trusting him allows us to step forward in faith, even when the way ahead seems unclear, confident that he will light our path one step at a time. Trust in God also deepens our relationship with him, fostering a sense of intimacy and closeness that cannot be achieved through self-reliance. Trusting God requires us to let go of our need for control and to place our dependence entirely on him. In doing so, we come to know him not only as Creator and Lord, but as a loving Father who cares deeply for his children. This relationship is not one-sided. As we trust in him, he reveals more of himself to us, drawing us closer to his heart and strengthening our faith. Perhaps the greatest reward of trusting God is the way it transforms our perspective on life. Trusting him shifts our focus from the temporal to the eternal, allowing us to see our lives through the lens of his greater purposes. It reminds us that our worth is not determined by our achievements or circumstances, but by his love for us. This perspective brings a profound sense of joy and freedom, enabling us to live with gratitude and confidence regardless of what we face. The rewards of trusting God are not always immediate or easily visible, but they are certain and enduring. As we place our faith in him, we begin to see his hand at work in our lives, weaving a tapestry of grace, mercy, and provision. Trusting God does not mean that we will never face trials or challenges, but it assures us that he will walk with us through them, bringing beauty from ashes and light from darkness. In his hands, our trust is never misplaced, for he is faithful and true, always working for our good and his glory. In the end, the essence of our faith lies in placing everything, our hopes, fears, and very lives, in God's capable hands. To trust him is to recognize his sovereignty, to walk in the light of true faith, to embrace the power of surrender, and to experience the profound rewards that flow from this trust. God, in his infinite wisdom and boundless love, calls us to let go of our need for control and to rest in the assurance that he holds all things together. This trust is not a sign of weakness, but of strength, for it acknowledges that we are not alone in the journey of life. He is with us in every valley, guiding us through every storm and preparing for us a future filled with his glory and our ultimate good. When we place everything in his hands, we find the peace that surpasses understanding, the hope that anchors our souls, and the joy that comes from walking in step with his perfect will. So today, let us respond to his invitation to trust. Let us surrender our burdens, release our fears, and place our faith entirely in him. In doing so, we will not only find rest for our weary souls, but also discover the abundant life he has promised to those who walk by faith and not by sight. For in his hands we are held, we are loved, and we are made whole. Amen.